The year ends in just a few days, and you feel that familiar restlessness settling in again. It's not just the fatigue from the holidays or the rush of final commitments. It's something deeper, more persistent. It's that anguish that seems to dwell at the bottom of your chest, waiting for moments of silence to manifest itself. While everyone celebrates achievements and makes promises for the next year, you wonder why this feeling of emptiness doesn't disappear with the pages of the calendar. If you recognize this feeling, if you've ever questioned why the passage of time brings more unrest than relief, then you are not alone. Albert Camus, the philosopher who most deeply understood this human condition, offers us a revolutionary perspective on this anguish that persists regardless of dates and celebrations. The turn of the year exposes a truth we prefer to ignore during the months of routine. Each December that ends places us before an implacable temporal mirror. There reflected is our most fundamental condition, that of beings conscious of our finitude, trapped between the desperate need to find meaning and the reality of a universe that remains mute before our most urgent questions. Camus called this the absurd, but not in the common sense of the word. The Camusian absurd is this daily, constant and inevitable confrontation between our thirst for answers and the cosmic silence that surrounds us. When the year ends, this tension intensifies because we are forced to take stock, to evaluate whether we have moved toward something meaningful or if we have simply spent another 365 days in circular motion. The anguish you feel is not a personal failure nor a sign of depression that needs to be medicated to disappear. It is, in fact, the most authentic symptom of your awakened humanity. It is the sign that you have not been able to completely anesthetize yourself with the distractions that our era offers in abundance. While others seem to navigate temporal transitions with almost artificial lightness, you carry the weight of perceiving that each end of cycle is also a reminder of mortality, a distant but audible echo of the end that awaits us. Camus did not see this as cause for despair, but as the starting point for an authentically lived life. The anguish that persists when the year ends is, paradoxically, proof that you are still truly alive, not just existing on the autopilot that characterizes so many contemporary lives. Observe how our society deals with these temporal transitions. There is an almost frantic rush to transform each year-end into mandatory celebration, into a moment of positive assessment, into an opportunity for magical renewal. Social media fills with carefully edited retrospectives, highlighting only moments that fit the narrative of progress and achievement. Traditions multiply, rituals become sophisticated, promises accumulate. All of this serves an unconscious but powerful purpose: to avoid direct confrontation with the inexorable passage of time and with the fundamentally uncertain nature of our existence. It is more comfortable to believe that each January first offers a real fresh start, a blank page where we will finally write the story we desire, than to accept that we are the same limited and mortal beings as in December. But you feel the anguish because you cannot completely delude yourself with these consoling narratives. There is something in you that resists the easy seduction of temporal optimism. And Camus would say that this something is your lucidity, your capacity to see beyond the smokescreens that culture constructs to protect us from the most fundamental truth about our condition. This truth is simultaneously terrible and liberating. There is no guarantee of meaning inscribed in the structure of the universe. There is no clearly revealed divine plan. There is no automatic progress that justifies our passage through the world. What exists is our consciousness, our capacity to create meaning through our choices, our possibility of affirming life even in the face of this absence of absolute guarantees. The anguish that accompanies the end of the year is intensified by our complex relationship with time. We live in a culture obsessed with temporal measurement, with the division of experience into discrete and measurable units. January, February, March. Each month carries its specific expectations, its mandatory milestones, its subtle pressures for us to fit into the collective rhythm of productivity and achievement. When December arrives, the accumulated weight of all these small pressures concentrates into a single question: was it worth it? And this apparently simple question hides a deep existential trap. It presumes that life should have a measurable meaning, that our existence should produce quantifiable results, that time should take us to some specific and identifiable place. Camus invites us to question this fundamental premise. What if the question is poorly formulated from the beginning? What if the search for an absolute and measurable meaning for our passage through time is exactly what generates persistent anguish? The Algerian philosopher proposed a radical inversion of perspective. Instead of looking for meaning in the external universe, we should recognize our capacity to create meaning through our conscious revolt against the absurd. Revolt, for Camus, is not a gesture of negation or destruction, but a passionate affirmation of human life, despite its lack of cosmic justification. When you feel the anguish of year's end, you are experiencing firsthand this tension between search and absence of answer. But there is an exit that does not pass through denial of the feeling, nor through its medicalization. The exit passes through recognition that this anguish is itself a form of knowledge. It teaches us something fundamental about our condition. We are beings who ask questions for which there are no definitive answers, and this is not a bug in our existential operating system. It is our most distinctive and precious characteristic. Think about the moments when you feel most alive, most present, most authentically yourself. They are probably not the moments when all your questions received satisfactory answers, but those when you manage to fully embrace your condition as a questioning being, restless, eternally searching. The anguish that persists when the year ends is an invitation to inhabit this condition with more awareness and less resistance. It is a call to stop looking in the calendar and temporal traditions for the solution to questions that are by nature timeless and permanent. Camus spoke of the importance of imagining Sisyphus happy. Sisyphus, in Greek mythology, was condemned by the gods to roll a stone up a mountain for all eternity. Each time he reached the top, the stone rolled back down, and he had to start over. For Camus, Sisyphus represents our human condition. We are condemned to seek meaning in a universe that offers no definitive answers, to build significance on foundations we know are temporary, to love people who will die, to create beauty that will dissolve. But the genius of the Camusian interpretation lies in proposing that Sisyphus can be happy precisely because he recognizes his condition and embraces it without illusions. Applying this metaphor to your year-end anguish, you can begin to understand that the problem is not the repetition of temporal cycles, nor the apparent lack of linear progress toward a clear final objective. The problem is the expectation that it should be different. When you accept that each year-end will bring its dose of existential melancholy, that each temporal assessment will reveal more questions than answers, that each new beginning will carry the same fundamental uncertainties as the previous cycle, something interesting happens. The anguish does not disappear, but it loses its power of paralysis. It transforms into a known companion, almost an old friend who visits us regularly to remind us of who we really are. Let me pause here for a direct question. Have you ever caught yourself pretending to be more excited about year-end celebrations than you really were? Have you ever felt that your anguish was something to be hidden or quickly overcome? Comment below. I feel this too. Your response not only validates your own experience, but helps other people going through the same thing feel less alone. You are not alone in this experience, and recognizing this publicly is an act of courage and human solidarity. Camus' philosophy offers us practical tools for dealing with this recurring anguish. The first is honest recognition of our absurd condition. This means stopping fighting against the fundamental nature of our existence and beginning to inhabit it with more awareness. When you feel the melancholy of year's end, instead of trying to push it away with distractions or forced optimism, you can experiment with inhabiting it for a few moments. Observe its nuances, its emotional textures, its messages. It is trying to tell you something important about who you are and about what really matters to you. The second tool is the practice of creative revolt. Revolt, for Camus, does not mean destructive rebellion, but the conscious refusal to passively accept ready-made narratives about how we should live and feel. When all of society insists that you should be celebrating and making optimistic promises for the next year, your anguish can be a form of authentic revolt. It is saying that you refuse to swallow the simplified stories about temporal progress and personal achievement. This revolt is paradoxically an affirmation of life, because it means you are demanding the right to feel and think authentically, even when this is uncomfortable. The third tool is the cultivation of human solidarity. Your anguish is not an isolated or pathological experience. It is a natural and shared response to the human condition. When you recognize this, you can transform your individual anguish into a bridge of connection with other human beings who experience the same existential tensions. Camus believed that recognition of our shared absurd condition was the basis of a genuinely human ethics. We do not need divine commandments or absolute natural laws to know that we should treat each other with compassion. It is enough to recognize that we are all in the same fundamental situation, conscious beings trying to create meaning in a silent universe. Observe how this changes your relationship with the people around you during year-end festivities. Instead of feeling alienated by the apparent ease with which others embrace celebrations, you can begin to perceive that many are, like you, dealing with their own versions of existential anguish. That exaggerated joy may be a form of coping. That rush to make plans for the next year may be a way to avoid confrontation with the fundamental uncertainty of the future. That insistence on traditions and rituals may be an attempt to create stability in a world that is, by nature, unstable. When you develop this more compassionate and realistic perspective on human behavior, your own anguish becomes less isolating and more revealing. It transforms into a window through which you can understand not only your own condition, but the human condition in general. And this understanding, in turn, can become a source of authentic meaning. Not a meaning discovered or revealed by some external authority, but a meaning created through your capacity to see, understand, and respond with compassion to the shared human experience. Year-end anguish also confronts us with our complex relationship with hope. Our culture promotes a specific form of hope, the belief that the next period will be better than the previous one, that we are walking toward a more satisfactory future, that our current struggles are investments in future achievements. But this conventional hope carries with it a subtle trap. It teaches us to always live a little outside the present, always anticipating a future moment when we will finally feel complete or fulfilled. Camus proposed a different form of hope, one he called lucid hope or hope without illusions. This hope does not deny the possibility of positive changes or moments of joy and fulfillment, but it does not place on these future moments the responsibility of giving meaning to our present existence. Lucid hope recognizes that the only moment in which we really exist is now, and that our capacity to create meaning and experience fullness does not depend on external changes or future achievements. When you feel anguish at the end of the year, part of this anguish may come from the unconscious perception that another period has passed without you reaching that state of complete fulfillment that our culture promises as possible. But what if the premise is wrong from the beginning? What if complete fulfillment is a cultural illusion, a carrot dangled in front of our face to keep us in constant motion? What if our true nature is exactly this? Eternally incomplete beings, eternally searching, eternally capable of growth and transformation. This perspective radically transforms the meaning of anguish. Instead of being a sign that something is wrong with us or with our lives, it becomes an indicator that we are alive and conscious in an authentic way. Instead of being a problem to be solved, it becomes a permanent characteristic of our condition that can be inhabited with grace, and even with a peculiar form of joy. Camus spoke about the importance of living with intensity, of embracing passion, even knowing its temporary nature. This does not mean seeking extreme experiences or constant strong sensations. It means being completely present in whatever experience you are living, whether it is joyful or melancholic, celebratory or reflective. Your year-end anguish can be lived with this same intensity and presence. It can become an opportunity for deep connection with yourself and with the reality of your human condition. This perspective leads us to a surprising discovery. Conscious and accepted anguish can be more authentic and even more satisfying than forced joy or superficial optimism. When you stop trying to escape from your anguish and begin to inhabit it consciously, something changes in its quality. It continues being anguish but loses its desperate urgency. It becomes a form of knowledge, a way of touching the deeper reality of your existence. This does not mean you should cultivate anguish as an end in itself, or that you should reject moments of joy and celebration when they arise naturally. It means you can stop dividing your emotional experiences into categories of good and bad, desirable and undesirable. You can begin to treat them all as valid and informative forms of response to life. If you have been following these reflections and recognize yourself in them, perhaps it is time to consider becoming part of a community that values the depth and authenticity of human experience. If you subscribe to this channel, you will be joining people who are not afraid to ask difficult questions and explore the less obvious dimensions of existence. It is not a promise of easy answers or immediate relief for your existential anxieties. It is an invitation to share the journey of understanding and meaning creation that is perhaps the most important adventure we can undertake as human beings. Camusian philosophy teaches us that our most fundamental freedom lies in the capacity to choose our response to circumstances we cannot control. You cannot control the fact that another year is ending. You cannot control the fact that time passes and that your life is limited. You cannot control the fact that the universe offers no guarantees about the meaning of your existence. But you can choose how to respond to these incontrovertible realities. You can choose to respond with creative revolt, affirming your right to create meaning and beauty even in the face of the absence of cosmic justifications. You can choose to respond with solidarity, recognizing in others the same absurd condition you experience and offering understanding and compassion. You can choose to respond with passion, living intensely each available moment instead of spending them in the search for guarantees that will never come. The anguish that persists when the year ends can become, then, not a burden to be carried, but a compass that always points toward what really matters. It reminds us of our mortality not to paralyze us with fear, but to motivate us to live with more presence and authenticity. It confronts us with the absence of pre-given meaning, not to make us despair, but to empower us as active creators of significance. When you understand this deeply, something fundamental changes in your relationship with temporal cycles and with the transitions they represent. The end of the year stops being a moment of reckoning and becomes a moment of recognition. Recognition that you have spent another period exercising your fundamental humanity, asking questions without definitive answers, creating meaning without absolute guarantees, loving people and experiences that are, by nature, temporary. The anguish you feel is not a defect in your existential operating system. It is proof that this system is working exactly as it should. You are a conscious being in an unconscious universe, a creator of meaning in a reality that offers no ready-made meaning, a lover of life in a condition marked by finitude. This is the human condition in its purest and most authentic form. Camus invites us to imagine that it is possible not only to accept this condition, but to celebrate it. Not with the superficial celebration that our culture promotes, but with the deep celebration that comes from recognizing that being human is in itself an extraordinary form of existence. We are the only beings we know capable of questioning our own existence, of creating art and beauty without external justification, of loving knowing the temporality of love, of building meaning on foundations we know are unstable. The next time you feel that familiar year-end anguish, remember that it is a sign that you have not given up being completely human. It is evidence that you are still engaged in the most important adventure, that of creating an authentic and meaningful life without waiting for someone or something external to tell you how to do it. It is proof that you belong to the lineage of great questioners, of lucid rebels, of those who chose the difficult freedom of meaning creation instead of the false security of ready-made answers. The year may end, but your capacity to question, create, and love continues. The anguish may persist, but it persists as companion to an extraordinary journey, the journey of being fully human in a universe that remains eternally silent before our deepest questions. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is not a tragedy to be lamented, but a miracle to be celebrated with all the intensity of which we are capable